From Wellsburg to Wetzel County, Barnesville to Bethany, across the northern panhandle and around eastern Ohio. This is Howard Monroe and the Watchdog Morning Show.
You're all puppets, tangled in strings. There are no strings on me.
Well, it can only mean one thing. The puppet master is here. The man who infamously asked the question last year, who's pulling the strings down here? Ohio County Delegate Shawn Fluharty. Good morning, Shawn.
Good morning, Howard. I love the intro.
That's it. You are the puppet master.
We need that in the legislature. I've said we can use intros like professional wrestling because it is pretty much like that.
That's what it is.
There.
I like that. You can. There are no strings on me. That's it. That's you. You're the puppet master. How are you?
I'm doing well. Glad to be back.
I have been watching and reading a lot of what's going to be coming up in the next session, and you just had interims. And I'm hearing a lot of the same stuff coming back again.
Yes.
Is there anything new anybody's talking about this year?
Well, I know we've had the Joint Committee on Tax Reform.
Right.
And I'm not privy to a lot of information thus far they've been discussing, but I think that's going to be an issue that we really didn't address last session that may come back and be fresh. But a lot of it is a lot of old information renewing itself, and forced pooling is going to be number one on the slate.
Tax reform. I am in favor of tax reform. If it literally is tax reform, I think there are some things that we should be doing with our tax system. But I fear, and I keep hearing from my friends on the right, oh, no, it's really reform. I fear it just means more corporate tax cuts. That's my fear, is what their form of tax reform is just more corporate tax cuts.
Yeah, we just heard some discussions take place during interims involving the severance tax and how what we're grossing now is much lower in recent years. But yet our severance tax is very low.
It is tremendously low.
It's 5%. The shirt on your back was taxed at 6 at least, and then wheeling here upwards to 7.5.
Right.
So then when the shirt on your back is taxed less than the minerals under the ground, it's a bit of a problem, I think, with our tax structure. So when we have discussions like forced pooling, within those discussions should be fair taxing. Let's have some fair taxing with it. And, that's an issue that we're going to need to address again next session.
I think tax reform should include some tax increases, because I think we need, first of all, to tax, and severance tax is one of them, and I think we need to look for ways to get more money from the gas industry. I also think we need to look at more ways to provide tax relief to the working class as opposed to the corporate class. And I think we need to probably look at tax. This is just me. I need to look at maybe a variety of things. I won't call them tax increases per se. A variety of revenue enhancements for infrastructure and roads.
Absolutely. Our infrastructure is crumbling. Everybody knows that, and that's an issue that we have to address. And there's no magic formula for it. And we have to be careful as a government. You never want to tax to the point where you're keeping businesses out. And I don't think we've done that thus far. Procter & Gamble is getting ready to open a huge plant.
This week? Next week?
I believe it's in the near future. I know they've made the announcement. The groundbreaking, I believe, is taking place maybe this week or next week. And they came under our current tax structure. Right. And so a lot of people are doing a lot of great things in the state under our current tax structure. So to make a revamp of it, I don't know if we should be cautious, is all I'm saying. We need to make sure we do it the right way and not jump to any conclusions.
Well, when we talk about tax reform, we need to keep I think we've got to keep in mind what's going to benefit the working West Virginian, the middle class West Virginian. We've been operating under, and God help us, they heard a big lecture again from failed economist Arthur Laffer down at the Business Summit on trickle-down economics. Or as I like to call it, what do I like to call it, Biff?
Pee down your leg?
Pee on your shoe economics. That's right. You pee in your pants and it hits your shoe eventually. That's what worries me, is that we've got so much of that going on.
Well, and I think we've heard this on a national scale, is that the income inequality in this country is at an absurd level. Billionaires continue to make billions, millionaires continue to make millions, yet the working class, the middle class, which drives our economy, they're really hurting right now. So we need to incentivize getting them back on their feet and not necessarily just allowing the people that make great money already continue to make more great money. We really need to sit down and have a frank discussion on that. Where do we want to go as a state and as a country on that issue? And it's been addressed repeatedly by presidential candidate Bernie Sanders. He really is bringing that up a lot. And that's something that it bothers me, because we need to make sure the middle class is strong again. And that's what drives our state. We know that we are a state comprised of a bunch of blue-collar, hardworking men and women. And they're struggling. They're struggling to make ends meet. I saw a study the other day. It said 1 in 4 are living essentially in poverty. in our state. So what are we going to do about that?
And we've heard from a couple of people in some interims, couple of the interim sessions in the past few months, including Keith Burdett, I think, who point out that it is the workforce that is really one of the bigger issues that brings people here as opposed to taxes. Yes. Businesses look to the workforce, and they look to making sure they've got a content and happy and trained workforce, drug-free workforce, and so on. And I would think that means that they're paid adequately.
I think if you would poll the businesses like Procter & Gamble and say, well, why'd you come here? Well, we came here because we actually have a friendly tax structure in place right now. And you need to have the good workforce to go with it. And that's where we're struggling as a state. Our workforce continues to rank very low because a lot of our best and brightest are leaving the state. Kids leave the state at the third highest rate in the country. There's no doubt about it. Our college graduates are leaving. So what are we going to do as a state to help fix that? In fact, I'm going to introduce legislation next session that I'm dubbing the Stay in the State Act. That's going to help incentivize.
Stay in the state.
Stay in the State Act. Right. We have the promise scholarship. And our promise to scholars is, look, if you stay here in West Virginia, we're going to help you with your education, and hopefully you're not burdened with too much in student loans. But then we found out recently that West Virginia ranks third in the country for students defaulting on their student loans upon graduation. So not only do we have our students leaving, the ones that are here and remain here are defaulting on their student loans at an incredible rate. So what are we doing to, one, incentivize those to stay here, and those that are here, help them? What I'm going to do is introduce a plan which was introduced in Maine a couple years ago, and it's been very successful. And the Stay in the State Act will allow employers to essentially buy into tax credits. The employer can jump on board, help
the
pay
employer.
Down. The employer can help pay down the student loans and receive a tax credit in return.
So if you're working for me and you've got a student loan, I can help you pay that off, and I, as the employer, get the tax credit.
Absolutely.
That's an interesting concept.
It's thinking outside the box. It's
is it working in Maine? Is it done?
It is working in Maine. They're having a higher retention rate, and that's exactly what we need in our state is a higher retention rate, because not only does that help those who remain here, it helps potential employers come into the state. If we improve our workforce, if we have a better field to choose from, that's a great thing. And then somebody who may have a job opportunity in, say, North Carolina, that has just graduated from WVU, and they're thinking about leaving the state, but if there's a $10,000 discrepancy in, say, the salary they're going to receive, and they know that half of that or more is going to come back to them because they're going to stay in West Virginia, well, are you going to leave the state for just a few grand? Maybe not.
Right.
Let's make that decision harder for the students who graduate from our state.
That's interesting. And that falls into that broad concept of tax reform, not just tax cuts, but tax reform. Right. Find ways to use the tax code to do some positive
Absolutely.
things.
And I've had some great discussions down in Charleston during the summer. It's kind of been my bill I've been working on, among others. And Generation West Virginia, which is dedicated to keeping young people here, they're on board with it. They want to see it run. Also a couple other bills as well, and they are 100% behind it. So I'm hoping to have more frank discussions, hopefully get involved with the chamber to try to get them on board. I think it's something that across the board people can agree on, and it almost pays for itself, because if you have people staying here, they're paying back into the economy.
They're paying taxes back into the economy.
They're spending money here. Their discretionary income's being spent in our state, and that's what we need. And we always hear, well, we got to keep young people here, but we don't see much action on it, Howard. It almost serves as a talking point. The same way I argue we use coal miners with the war on coal talking point, we're using students and people leaving as a talking point, and then we just use it for politicians to blow hot air and say, well, we got to keep people here. But
what do you do? How do you do that? I mean,
step one is the bill that I'm going to introduce that hopefully gets passed in our state legislature.
That I think has some strong possibilities. Because I'm with you. You hear people say, well, we want to keep people in the state. Well, of course we do. But what are you going to do about that? How do you do it? I mean, ultimately, the best way to do it is to have lots of good-paying jobs.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's the ultimate answer.
Well, we have failed to diversify our economy. We've failed miserably for decades in our state to diversify our economy, and we're seeing it now because what's going on mixing the oil and gas industry and capitalism with the coal industry, we're seeing the coal industry decline, and then there's arguments that obviously the regulations on top of that on the national level have hurt our coal industry. So we've had like this wave come through the state of West Virginia, and the oil and gas wave hasn't resulted in more jobs for West Virginians. I mean, you see the license plates in the Ohio County.
Absolutely.
They're not from West Virginia. And we need to incentivize hiring people. And in order to do that, we never really prepared. We saw this decline in the coal industry coming, and we didn't prepare for it. All we do is have people stand up and yell that it's going to make a comeback when the facts tell us otherwise.
Right.
Now, somebody like me looks at it and says, okay, if the facts are the facts, we can't change them. Now, you're not entitled to your own facts. You can always have your own opinions.
Right.
But the fact is the decline was coming. We didn't prepare for it. We didn't prepare that workforce to transition to a different workforce like oil and gas. And what these men and women have in common is They can work hard, and they can do these jobs, but we got to prepare them for it, and we haven't done that.
Right. You mentioned talking points a minute ago. I was talking to Shawn Fluharty, the puppet master, here on the Watchdog Morning Show, 9:35 a.m., 1600 a.m., 1370. You mentioned talking points, and there are certain things that all politicians say. They say we want to keep people in the state, and they say we want better jobs. And it used to be, and this is what fascinates me, it used to be that all politicians would say we want higher paying wages for our people. What fascinates me is that coming out of the Republican leadership, they no longer even say it. Now they openly say we want lower paying wages for the working people. I mean, they say it out loud. We want to get rid of prevailing wage because it will lower the wages people make. It's like we've gone through the looking glass.
It's shocking, and what that bill is going to do is potentially lower the wages of the families that are here already,
right,
that are working. And what's going to do is incentivize outside companies to come into the state. Those who do not live here, do not raise their families here, do not attend our churches, do not attend our schools, we're going to allow them to come in. I've been calling them job chasers. We have storm chasers. So if there's a tornado over in Columbus, you run over there with your technology, you film the tornado, and you get out of Dodge.
And you go back home. Yeah.
Well, here's what we're going to have in West Virginia. Job chasers. You come into West Virginia, you do the job, you underbid it, you do the job, and you run.
Yeah.
You get out of West Virginia as soon as you're done. And a lot from the same crowd that preaches that we need to do away with prevailing wage is also the same crowd that really has an issue with illegal immigration and people coming into our country illegally. Well, guess what? States that have right to work laws, states that do away with prevailing wage, have an increase in illegal immigrants. And it kind of makes sense, does it not? Because people with less skills come in. Those with less skills were not trained properly.
Yeah, because they'll work for the lower wage.
That's right. And there's a good chance that maybe they'll work for anything because they're not even from here.
Right.
And I think that's kind of a secondary effect that nobody really talks about because they don't want to address it because they don't want to realize they're being detrimental to their usual talking points.
But it's just amazing. Again, it used to be, now sometimes they didn't mean it when they would say it, but used to always say, we want higher paying jobs.
Yeah.
Now they don't even say it. Now they just openly say, no, we want lower paying jobs.
Well, because now with the dynamic we have in West Virginia, it probably polls differently than it did in the past.
Sure it does.
So we know a lot of politicians will only say things based upon polling and not based upon facts. And that's really a problem. We saw with the debate the other night. You know, that was everything we do now politically is so manufactured.
Right.
We have a manufactured debate with manufactured candidates and manufactured journalism. And it's shocking to me. And then we have manufactured outrage after it.
That's true. You're exactly right. And in West Virginia, prevailing wage, so we want to get rid of prevailing wage because we want to lower the wages of working West Virginians. And then we have at least one member of the party, the Republican Party, and I'll phrase it that way because that's all where I've heard it come from yet, but we have at least one member who wants to now not just deal with prevailing wage, but maybe get rid of the minimum wage.
I read that last week.
The attack on working West Virginians is, again, they used to be more clever in hiding it. I mean, it is a blatant attack on working West Virginians.
You know, when we had the rally in Charleston last session, it was like 5 degrees.
Right.
And there was a winter storm, and everybody thought nobody would show up. And there's, and literally over 1,000, I believe. A lot of them bust from the Northern Panhandle. A lot of friends were down there that I saw. I can't believe you guys are here. I mean, there's 10 inches of snow out there. Well, we're not missing this. And we had that rally, and I was actually the only freshman delegate to speak at the rally, and I jumped up there, and it was kind of impromptu, but I said, you know, they love jobs so much because we hear it repeatedly, jobs, but they want you to work 2 or 3 just to survive.
Right.
And that's just another example of that, is let's cut your wages. And when did hardworking men and women become the enemy?
Right.
Are they really driving down the economy? No. They have to have money. If you drive down their wages and they can't pay their bills, and they can't get by, and they're having trouble putting food on the table, they have no discretionary income. What are they going to use to drive the economy? How are these employers, how are they going to stay open? I mean, we're going to be open for business, so we should be open for living wages in the state of West Virginia as well.
Well, it goes to the fallacy that we've heard for a long time, and you got to give a lot of credit to the Republican leadership for across the country for having built this image that the job creators are big businesses. Job creation comes with a comfortable middle class with money in its pocket to spend.
That's right.
Because when I go out and buy more, the business will have to make more to sell me more, and that's how jobs are created. Businesses don't just sit around and say, oh, I think I'll create some jobs for the hell of it now. No, they only do it when there's demand, and the demand comes when you and I have more money in our pockets to go out and spend.
That's right. And we're seeing this on the national scale with the student loan problem, which it's not just down to our state. The student loan problem's nationwide because we have this bubble now.
It's a huge problem.
It's a huge problem. It surpasses credit card debt. So that says a lot because a lot of people don't know how to use those credit cards. But we have a student loan problem, and then we talk about discretionary income. So we have the middle class. You have people like my father. He's been an electrician for 30 plus years. He's your typical hardcore blue collar worker. And I feel like his ability to make money is being under attack right now. But at the same time, we're not looking out for the next generation to come. We don't have kids my age. I'm 31. We don't have the discretionary income to go buy cars, buy homes. That generations ago at that age, that's what you were doing. Because now you're so burdened with student debt that you pay a house payment back to the government because your student loan interest is 6.8%. But if you go try to get a used car or something, you might be able, if you have good enough credit, get it lower. I mean, it's shocking to me that students are getting loan interest at 6.8%, but yet big banks and people with a lot of money are able to get a much lower interest rate.
Sure.
It's shocking the country we've created with that. And now the bubble's about to burst because when the older generation, I don't call them older necessarily, but the generation is ready to go into the sunset like my father and retire soon, hopefully. I hope he does.
He's talking about me, babe.
I figured
when
that.
He's
start
trying to
retiring,
dance around that, but he's going,
Well,
like you, Monroe. He's dancing around that.
But they're not going to be the driving force in the economy anymore. And so we got to look to the next level. And the next level is not going to be able to drive the economy because they're not going to be able to have the discretionary income.
That's exactly right. The puppet master is here, Shawn Fluharty, Ohio County Delegate. And a quick break. We'll check into the news desk from the Big Seven. Rachel is here. And I want to get to forced pooling, which you alluded to earlier. I think that's going to be a
government theft, you mean?
well, that's it. It was only because of a really unusual coalition of people at the very last day of the session that it did not occur last year. So we'll talk about that. Forced pooling is going to make its way back. They may try and come up with different names for it this time around. They may have some slightly revised approaches to it. We'll talk about it and what's likely to happen next. On the Watchdog Morning Show, we're looking for a sunny day, a high of 81, 62 tonight, 80 tomorrow. Cooler come Sunday with 65 for our high, and then in the 70s next week. It is 60 in Moundsville, 62 in Lansing, 62 here at the Robinson Auto Group Studios in downtown Wheeling in the heart of the Ohio Valley.